What's going on, everybody? Chris here. It's been a little bit over a year since we bought our portable garage shelter to do work under, and the good news is it's still standing. I know some of you that are thinking about buying one of these were asking for an update video. It's a little bit windy today, but I think it's a good time to show you guys how this thing's holding up for us. The one thing I'm really happy with is how this is holding up in the sun. It doesn't seem to be getting brittle at all due to the sun, at least not yet. We usually cover a lot of our stuff with tarps, and those tarps don't last very long in the sun. They get all shredded and start flaking blue flakes all over the yard. It does seem like there's a little more slack in all the material than there used to be, but I know that we can go through and tighten up some of that stuff with ropes, and there's a couple straps there that we can mess around with to try to get that tight again. Somebody suggested that we should get a UV resistant tarp and cover this on top of it, which is a pretty good idea. I also have been trying to pay attention with right up there, you know, right where the ridge is, seeing if there's any tears and stuff. It looks like it's doing okay. Somebody else had mentioned that we should take this all off and then put some kind of corrugated metal roofing on it and on the sides and cut little doors and stuff. Since we're renters and this is kind of like a temporary workspace for us, I don't want to get that crazy. Now, it does get really hot for us in here, but I normally open up both sides. And then I purchased one of these fans from Harbor Freight here, which works really nice. One thing that's been really interesting is since the wind blows in here and we have a dirt ground, everything in here is just covered with a real fine layer of dust. So I do get pretty filthy in here, and then I got to constantly be cleaning like whatever project I'm working on, or cover it up or take it out, or when I leave the door open, it's a little less. But when I close both sides of the doors, it gets really dusty inside here. You can see how everything just has like a layer of dust all over it. Typically we get like 20 to 25 mile an hour winds, but it can get up to 40 or 50 mile an hour winds. So there's been a few nights where I've stared out the back window of the house going, man, I sure hope it doesn't blow away. The fine people over at Rhino Shelter sent me these anchors to also use in addition to the cable ones from the install video. Now this thing, you can see it has sunk into the ground a little bit, which has caused the tent to be uneven, but I haven't seen these move at all. In fact, this ground gets so dry and so hard, I don't think that's ever coming out unless, you know, we get like a huge rainfall or something and the ground softens up. But that part has not been an issue at all for us. So one of the things that a few people mentioned is that they put concrete pads or blocks down underneath the bars, and you can see how over time this thing has actually sunk down a little bit. And because it's sunk down, and because I didn't have this thing up in the air, it's basically has been rubbing. Now, right now it's not so bad, but when I did have the metal bars that it came with that I also put sand inside, you can imagine the thing just basically rubbed back and forth and actually started to wear itself all the way through. It hasn't really affected me. The only thing that's made it kind of a pain is that rolling this thing up, you know, is not as easy without the bar in there. The other thing is, since it was going back and forth and rubbing through that, it also severed its way through these ropes. Besides rubbing, it's gotten kind of brittle from the sun. See how this nylon rope actually just kind of busts. I haven't repaired it yet, but I bought some new rope that I can string up there. I haven't had a chance to replace it yet, so I've just been using these clamps. Another issue we have is we have a mole that comes around and digs up the yard, and I think that's part of the reason why some of these poles are sinking into the ground. One of the comments that we had that was a pretty cool idea is they used fence pickets, like the star pickets, and they put that in below, and then they just bolted them in place. I think either doing that or the concrete could keep these from sinking in the ground. So a lot of times when these doors are flapping back and forth like this and you have it zipped, the zipper actually has worked itself up. Then what I was doing was buckling these buckles for reinforcements. Well, unfortunately, what ended up happening is the buckle sewing came off. It didn't damage the actual tent material too bad, but since it ripped off, I can't use those anymore. Now, I called the manufacturer, and what they said is they've revisited these buckles, and they're larger, more seatbelt sized buckles, or they don't even have them at all on some of them. The other thing that a lot of people mentioned in the comments was their concern on these rips that I made during the installation video. Now they do instruct you to put tears in the tent so that you can slide the poles and stuff through. And there actually was already a slit right here. I just cut another inch to give me enough slack. But you can see that after a year of this thing blowing, it still has not tore at all. This material is really awesome. It doesn't tear. So for people that were worried about that or concerned about that as far as being a no-go for buying a tent like this, that's not anything you need to worry about. Here's another example of that tear that I made to go through there. Some people were like, oh, you need to install grommets and stuff like that, and I haven't had any issues. Here's an example of a little screw up that I did. I actually had a sawhorse that was sitting inside the tent, and I didn't realize that this thing was banging and rubbing up against it. So it actually rubbed a hole all the way through. Now this thing did come with a patch that I could put on there. It's actually a green one, but if I wanted to, I could always patch it up. It doesn't seem to be getting any bigger. If there is any piece of wood or a corner that's hitting the edge, I just put some moving pads there to protect it. So this is the only thing I think that's happened that is a real big issue, is that the zipper on this back side actually has come unsewn a little bit. So when I zip this up, I still have an opening. It seems to be getting a little bit worse over time, but you know, in a whole year, that's not too bad. And I called the manufacturer, so they're going to be sending us a new end panel to replace. But this is the only place that seems to be coming unsewn and working itself apart. Just like the buckles in here, that seems to be the only issue, is just some of the sewing is coming off. But this material is really tough so far. We haven't had any issues other than my sawhorse poking through. One thing one of the viewers in the install video mentioned is that to keep this from flapping back and forth, to install poles on both sides, and that would keep it inside there. I was afraid of doing that because I was afraid that if the poles were rigid and in place, that they would wear holes in the sides of this, just like the sawhorse hole did. So I never was brave enough to try that. That was definitely a one idea that you could try. One of the things that I tried is I put these sandbags on either side of it, and it would hold it in place for a little while, but then it would just flap over the top of it. But at least I knew that it wasn't going to wreck anything. All the work tables and stuff I set up in here, I just make sure that there's space in there, so if this thing's flapping around, it's not hitting against the tables. All the joints that I put tape on to protect the outer shell seems to be holding in place. I've noticed just recently working in here, when it gets real windy, it's all starting to kind of squeak a little bit. So it's all starting to sound like a rickety, haunted, portable storage shelter. It's crazy how loud that rain hitting that can get. I mean, honestly, other than it being hot in here sometimes and it being dusty, we've been so happy with this thing. It's been very nice for us to work under. It was definitely worth the money for us to invest in getting a place to work, as opposed to what we were doing before, which was like just propping up a tarp as good as we could. I'd actually even like to buy another one and connect it to it so I have a big old space. Forgive me for my workshop here being all dirty. I'd be lying if I said that it's normally clean and organized. Man, now that I'm recording and making this video, I really realize I need to come in here and clean. There's so much junk in here. It just means I need to get another one of these shelters to work under that's empty. I'll just keep filling shelters. Well, that's going to do it for today. I think that's about all I can think up for giving you guys an update on how this thing's doing. I can always give another update again in the future, let you guys know. And if you guys have any questions, please feel free to let me know in the comments below. If you haven't seen the install video, it's a long one, but we show all the details on what it took to set this thing up. So be sure to check that out. Give us a like, hit the subscribe button, and we'll see you guys next time.